Well, hey there, senior leader, and welcome to the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. I'm your host, Jackson Lynch, and today I am joined by my co-host, Scott Morris. He's the founder of Propulsion AI. Scott, we have both seen HR functions that are cruising along thinking everything is fine, but the new McKinsey HR Monitor for 25 is a reality check. If HR were a patient, the doctor would not be prescribing vitamins. They'd be saying, you got 12 to 24 months to fix this or you're in trouble. Otherwise known as what my doctor says to me every time he sees my cholesterol. Here's the headline findings, because I want to make sure before we talk about this that everyone knows exactly what's at stake. The HR Monitor from McKinsey says that workforce planning is still short-term and tactical when it should be scenario-driven and tied to strategy. The talent acquisition is broken, only about half the hire stick, and offer acceptance is weak and probationary washouts are high. They talk about the employee development process is fragmented. Performance, learning and development, talent growth, succession, they all live in different silos and are not tied to business strategy. Employee experience still undercooked, not personalized, not data-driven, not moving the needle on commitment. And finally, they argue that HR has yet to seize generative AI or shared services as levers to scale and deliver real strategic value. So what's the big picture? The gap is widening between what's needed and what most organizations are actually delivering. And the next 12 to 24 months will determine if HR earns credibility as a driver of business performance or gets sidelined. Now, before we dive into this, a quick reminder, please subscribe, comment, leave us a brief review on your favorite platform. This is how we grow the pod and, frankly, how we know that you're listening while pretending to clean out your inbox. So, Scott, let's dive into this thing. Why is it, in your view, that HR is still falling behind when the stakes have never been higher?
So I think it's funny when, as you were setting us up for the conversation, Jackson, that you said in the next 12 to 24 months, the profession is going to determine whether we earn credibility or whether we get sidelined. We've been saying that same thing for the last 15 years. And I don't think the time frame has changed. It's always this urgency of coming, and we never seem to really make that left turn that you're talking about and get back on track. And I think there are a couple reasons for that, right? Let's acknowledge the diversity of our audience. There are some people who are departments of one, and they are just struggling to keep the lights on, and that is a different problem than the other end of our audience, which are large and large concern CHROs and CEOs in some cases, who have very large enterprises under them that focused on people development in their organizations. But all of them suffer from one thing, and that is distraction. Everything people doesn't belong in the people department. And in fact, I co-authored an article that got picked up in HR Exec magazine. And one of the points that my co-author and I try to make is CHROs need to start shedding all of the compliance and non-strategy related work from their departments. And I mean everything. And I think the key to really actualizing on your setup is get rid of everything that distracts you so that you have the capacity, without going to the CFO with your hand up for more people, to actually do some of the things we're going to talk about in this pod. And that's why we keep falling behind, is because we're not doing that. We're never taking big, bold steps. We're always playing around the edges. That's my take.
I agree with you, but let me double click on that. Why is it that we continue to focus? I think it is because we still define success within the realm of HR, and that is a fundamental flaw. And what is different now than when we've had this conversation every year for the last 20 years, and I've been in those, of course, I get it. The difference is we now have a tool that is being implemented into our businesses that has a fundamental change in how we design work. And today, a lot of that work is being designed by the IT guys because it's technology. And that, in my view, is not where it needs to be. They have never been really good at thinking outside of the zeros and ones. That is what we need to go and focus on. But until we have a view of outcomes and we tie all of the sub processes we do towards those outcomes, we're going to be lagging. And that's why I think there really is a difference between where we are today and where we've been historically. Because as a sitting CHRO, you have to ask yourself, where is my incremental human value add beyond what could be pulled into large language models that predict patterns and candidly potentially do it better than us? There are some. We need to be focusing on those, and designing work, I think, is a huge one.
Yeah, I think two big areas. One is the design of the actual roles, and I think that one of the really interesting potential uses for artificial intelligence is performance management. And I know we're going to talk about that, but huge opportunities for artificial intelligence. And sorry for the tangent comment, but let's be careful to define the technologies appropriately, right? Artificial intelligence, I mean, just technology broadly is not AI. AI has very specific things that it's very, very good at, and that's different from automation, which is what a lot of HR tech has really become. Artificial intelligence is really good at consuming large amounts of data and then finding patterns in it. And I think performance management is a great opportunity on that front, but as is potentially dynamic skills mapping.
No doubt. In fact, I think our very first podcast we did together, we brought on Chris Marceau from Top Grading. That program is all about pattern recognition.
Yeah.
Our hiring processes, pattern recognition. Our development processes should be pattern recognition. Our performance management should be pattern recognition. So, and goes on and on and on. So, how do we start thinking differently about it?
Well, let's get down to the component parts. Let's start with workforce planning. You have done way more strategic workforce planning than I do. My question to you is, how do we stop treating workforce planning like it's filling seats and start treating it like it's business strategy?
Well, Stephen Covey says you got to begin with the end in mind. And I go all the way back. How did I get my first job in HR? It was because I was in the engineering function. And the entire thing we did was workforce planning at the Boeing company back, in the early 90s. I just dated myself, I think. But we had a massive amount of headcount that was shifting between functions and some that were going out the door. I think across the organization, 30,000 people over about a 36-month period that we were there. And kind of my team was responsible for figuring out kind of skills and where everything goes. 1993. I'm not sure that we have made any changes from that point. Like, we went from acetotes to digital presentation, but at the end of it all, like, everything is still there. And here's why I think that is. Because we start with the knowledge of where we are. I think we need to change that and think about where it is we need to be to enable tomorrow's business strategy. I've done a solo pod on this very topic. That is all algorithmic. And we need less intuition and more algorithmic to figure out where those things go. And then we can use the pattern recognitions to be able to best position ourselves there. And there are companies that are out there doing that right now, McKinsey being one of them, some of the other big consulting firms. They are realizing, here are the skills that I'm going to need in 2030, and I'm going to start building them now, because that will be what their clients are going to be looking for in the moment. And the reality is, we should be acting no different from that, but we start with where we are versus where we need to be. And so next thing you know, you have misaligned skills, you have fragile org charts. You're not even thinking about execution around strategy because you're starting from where you are. And I think we just have to reframe in order to think about planning as a way to anticipate disruption, and in doing so, we can build workforce planning in a different function.
Well, one thing's for sure, and that is the disruptions are going to come at faster and faster rates than they did previously.
Yeah, look, if you're not planning for skill obsolescence, you're basically planning for obsolescence of the business.
Yeah.
So we do need, in my view, to make a material change on how we do it. Start with where you're headed and work your way back. Don't start with where you are and work your way forward. So as you're thinking about talent acquisition, one of the things the HR Monitor report from McKinsey talked about was globally the stick rate of hires, and they put it in Europe just under 50% of new hires stick within a couple of years. Probationary washouts, the offer acceptance rate really low, and I think our numbers are a little higher, in the United States. But this is a global podcast, so for those of you who are across the pond, we're going to talk about you here for a second. How do we think about talent acquisition differently to change those numbers? Because I don't think we do things terribly different on either side of the pond.
Yeah, and I don't think. By the way, there's a article that was published in Harvard Business Review that quoted about those same numbers for the United States, and I think it's called "You've Got Hiring All Wrong." I'll fish out the article and we can put it into the show notes. You know where I come out on this one because of what Propulsion AI does. That we've got to start with thoughtful, intelligent design of the role. If you don't do that, you anchor to absolutely nothing. And one of the reasons that 46% of new hires fail, and by the way, in the US, the stat is in their first 18 months, is that we are hiring without a real standard. We are still engaged in hiring where we're comparing candidate to candidate and using gut instinct rather than science and evidence-based approaches like behavior-based interviewing to find talent and match them to a standard. And that causes a cascade of problems all throughout talent management. Now we start having to worry about performance management differently. We think about the employee experience differently, and we're trying to give people things rather than giving them interesting work. Interesting work starts, the root of it is, do I have a design for this particular role that I can connect to something that is actually driving the business? And can I find somebody with the skills and interest to actually do that role? When I make that match, that's where attrition drops.
Yeah, 13 minutes before we start talking about outcomes being the starting point.
I mean, it's a big topic for us because it
It is because
matters.
that is the wonder drug. If you don't do that well, talent acquisition doesn't work. And I'll even poke the bear on this one a little bit because I know this is in your wheelhouse. Behavioral based interviewing is necessary but insufficient. What is in order for us to get all the way to where we need to be? The question is, have you done it once with a practiced answer? The question is, have you done the skill or competency I'm looking for you to do for me at multiple times in different kind of contexts, and the confidence level that I can apply that you can do it for me? Like that takes more than 30 minutes and a thumbs up and thumbs down.
Yeah.
That takes, but it starts with understanding the outcome you're searching for, and that's where I think we just absolutely fail.
Well, I was going to say, understanding the outcome is one thing, and then the process that we use to get there is also important, and in my opinion, is equally broken. Every interview process should be broken down into component parts, and the role, you talk about the use of technology. Recruiters are involved in the wrong things. Recruiters need to be symphony conductors that are bringing together, one, if they're really good and senior recruiters, their own experience in making nuanced judgments about talent. But they also need to be coordinating the efforts and teaching the interviewers how to interview. And a great interview process, in my mind, has components to it. Group one, you guys are focused on technical skills. You do not get to ask questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Sorry for the expletive. I hope we get sound effects on this pod, but it's truly a nonsense question. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to be around in 5 years, at least if you believe the trends. So that question doesn't matter. But focus. the whole interview on technical and skills. Group 2, you're on behaviors and competencies. Group 3, you're on the relationship between past experiences and future needs according to the outcomes. And all of that requires a role design. But the role design alone is not enough. You've got to structure the process to really get under the covers. And as you said, not make it just a 30-minute thumbs up, thumbs down. Candidates don't mind longer interview processes as long as they are value loaded, right? If you're asking the same questions over and over and you just have 13 interviews because everybody's got to have a say, top candidates are not going to stand for that. But if every interview is really probing a different aspect, then candidates see that as investing in figuring out who's really right for this role and supporting the person who ultimately is going to get the job.
Double clicking on the role that talent acquisition plays, I think you then need to look at the outcome that we hold them accountable for, and that has got to change. Because everything you talked about goes to the wayside if all I am measured on as a recruiter is whether or not I got the job filled within a certain time period.
Yeah.
Okay. It is speed to impact that matters. Time to fill is a yesterday thing. Or since we're going to throw the explicit on here anyway, it's a measure, and we need to stop doing it. And if you want to really get me frosty, talk to me about average time to fill, because not only is that a stupid measure, it's one that actually doesn't measure performance well at all. If I have 3 people and I should be filling them with, on average 60 days to fill a position, and I have, I filled 1 in a day, I filled 2 in 1 in 89 days and 1 in 90 days. How am I doing as a recruiter? I'm doing pretty bad. And my average time to fill, if I did the math right in my head, was 60. So I'm going to measure myself as being great.
Yeah.
Like it's nonsense. Anyway.
Well, you know what else is wrong? I mean, and we've talked about this. You and I have talked about this before on other episodes. It's an activity metric. It's not an impact metric. We need to be accountable for impact metrics.
Yeah, it comes back to the Talent Sherpa scorecard, and it's time to impact. Because if we look at speed impact, if we look at where the process outcome is, I'm a hiring manager. I have someone in the seat who is fully functional. That person leaves. The only measure that matters is how long it takes for me to get someone back in that seat being fully functional. Ideally, better. And everything else is a sub-measure to that, but that is the measure that actually drives business outcomes, not any of the HR sub-process things that we hold people accountable for, because we feel bad about holding people accountable to something they don't have full ownership of. Like, no one else in the business gets that luxury. Can we just stop that, please?
Well, you make the point very well, but there's a point that I want to emphasize just because because I think you said it rightly, right? It's the total time to full productivity that matters. And so if, as a recruiter, if I'm a little bit longer in terms of time to fill the role, but I fill it with somebody who is 10x better, and they come up to productivity 40% faster, 50% faster, that's what we're really after, right? It's not just how well did you get somebody in the seat. It's how did you return the business to that same level of productivity that existed before the vacancy.
Yeah, and look, I'll tell you, this one's a little bit harder to measure with pure data, but we will be getting that data shortly, and you can have an analog for it right now. Just ask the manager when that is true, and that like, I just get very, very fired up on that one. That's the only talent acquisition metric that I think matters. But let's talk about a different part of the function that is equally broken. And my question to you, Scott, is, as you were a sitting CHRO, I'm sure that you had business partners, you had L&D people, you had folks that were focused on performance management, you had kind of HRIS systems that were underlying supporting, depending on what your tech stack looked like. And yet, and I did too, just for the record, and yet each one of those sub processes is missing the bigger picture. So why is it that we continue to operate in separate silos in your view?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a really good. I wish I had a really good answer for that. You and I think each of us sees the HR business partner function differently. I think we both agree that it needs to evolve, that the way most HR business partners operate is not optimal. The way I tried to implement HR business partner as a concept was back to my comment about symphony conductor. You are the focal point that brings everything together. You have tools and your job is to be a carpenter and use those tools. And so my HR business partners regularly had people that were accountable for the activities of performance management and learning and development and career development and employee experience. Like all of those people were convened by the HR business partners. They didn't report to them, but the business partner convened those people and had them talking about the needs within their portfolio of departments.
This is why I come back to the Talent Sherpa HR scorecard, human capital scorecard. What is the measure here? I think it's talent density.
Mm.
And if you focus on talent density, then you have all of the underlying silos that are kind of focused in on that singular outcome, and your disconnected systems and programs are now focused in on the different tactics that need to be applied to reach the talent density expectations that you have for the team. And that kind of instinct and the ability to understand which tactic is right for the moment that we're in to drive that talent, that's where an HR business partner, or whatever we end up calling that at a later time, that's where that process, that role adds tremendous value. But even now, we continue to think about things in terms of these homogenous one size fits all, and probably no more so than employee experience. I know you have some thoughts on that one, but let's bring it.
You want to talk employee experience? I mean, I think there are three questions that need to get answered. And for me, they're the only questions that matter. Pool tables, foosball, stocked refrigerators, food at work. It's all really interesting. Some of it might even be necessary. But at the end of the day, people come to work because they want to do things. They want to be involved in something meaningful. I'm a theory why guy. I think most of the time we just get in people's way, but if we would get out of their way, people want to come to work, they want to do a good job, and they want to work on things that are really important. So the three questions are, do I have interesting work? And the second, and interesting here is work that matters to where the business is headed. Second is, do you want to do that work? And that we presumably sort out in two areas. One should be in talent acquisition, but the other should be in performance management. And then the third question is, do I have a plan for growing you as the boss? And if that is employee experience, you get to be involved in something that is meaningful. You want to have that meaning, and I'm going to help you to grow and develop as you are actualizing that. I mean, I think that's employee experience for me in a nutshell. And the rest of the stuff is nice, but it's sort of dressing around the outside. It's the green in the meat case. The red meat is meaningful work.
Scott, it's an interesting view that you have, but it continues to come back to, do we know what is expected of the employee / role? If you have not defined outcomes, you can't get to the answer to your first question, which makes question 2 and 3 even harder. Yeah. So but I totally agree with you on, and I think unfortunately for many in Silicon Valley, they have reached a similar conclusion. The foosball tables aren't in fact helpful. There are benefits that come from them. There's no doubt about that. There's some collaboration and trust building and the ability to pulse your kind of mental focus and acuity. All of that is true and good, but it is not what drives the employee experience. I know what is expected of me at work. I know that work matters to the purpose of the organization. And especially as we have people that are joining the workforce, that linked purpose matters almost as much as anything else. As my, by the time this airs, probably former company, experienced is you had people that were more interested in preserving the industry than the company, than the customers even. It was because they felt like they were part of something bigger than themselves, and and that made everything else a little bit easier, and probably overcame the fact that some of our employee experience work was undercooked. But today, coming all the way back to the point we started with, all of our HR organizations, many of our HR organizations, most that I've seen, are set up in sub-functional silos. And I just believe that fragmentation is the silent killer of motivation, and it allows us to feel good about the work that we're doing without actually having a meaningful and direct impact as measured by the business.
I agree with you, Jackson, but I don't know whether this is temper what you're saying, because you may also believe this, right? There is a value in having disciplinary subject expertise and people who think deeply about the science of getting people to, for example, learn and grow, right? And there's a value in having those people concentrated and thinking. I think it's not, to the degree that anybody interpreted us this way, it's not that we have different departments that are doing these things. It's that we're failing to thoughtfully integrate their efforts around the business strategy and the metrics that are driving the organization.
Yeah, 1,000%. It is that we haven't thoughtfully pulled everything together, and we measure them as sub processes.
Right. I would never not want to have PhD level people that are leading my learning and development function, but I don't want them operating off to the side, and I don't want them thinking that the activities of learning and development are their metrics. The business metrics are their metrics, and they're going to actualize and impact those business metrics through some very learning and development specific things. But the business metric is theirs.
What is it about the HR operating model that needs to be thoughtfully reconsidered in order to be ready for AI?
Well, I would go back to where I started, right? Do you have the capacity to actually think things through? And if you are getting distracted by the administrative aspects, correct that, because some of the admin aspects are significant, but the compliance stuff isn't. Let that go. Let it go to legal. Let it go to risk management. Let it go someplace else. Just because it's people related doesn't mean that it belongs in the people department, right? That's the first thing. You've got to have capacity in order to think about how to thoughtfully implement artificial intelligence or other technologies to serve the ends that you're trying to get to. That would be my starting point. What would you add?
Yeah, I would add that ultimately the CHRO has to own the AI agenda, because the AI agenda is the redefinition of what work is done and how it is done. And if we outsource that to the digit heads in our technology teams, we will have wonderful machine learning applications. We will have wonderful technology, and we might miss the human nature of what that work ultimately turns into. And I think when we do it, we miss the chance to lead in a place where we are. I think it is our destiny to be the leaders of this work, and I'm just fearful that unless we get our collective acts together, that we'll miss the window. And once that window closes, it will no longer be our work. And that's going to be a crying shame. All right, folks, it is time to wrap this one up. Or as Scott likes to say, let's circle back in Q4. So Scott, do you want to hit us with a summary?
I have literally never said that. Puts me on makes a quip and then puts me on the spot. All right, here's my summary, Jack. I think number one, there's a widening gap that we in the profession of human resources need to pay attention to. The next 2 years are going to decide our credibility, and bold steps are necessary. 2, workforce planning, strategic, not headcount math, not just about refilling what's missing. 3, talent acquisition is just fundamentally broken. You've got to think about it as an ecosystem. It's got to start with role design, and it can't just be about transactions. 4, employee development and employee experience and learning and development they've got to be integrated, not fragmented. And last but not least, and really critically important, digital and artificial intelligence and new tech are not add-ons. They are core, and we've got to start treating them like they are core to the modern and future HR function.
Scott, that might have been the best summary I've heard in my entire life. So thank you for
making
that.
up for your quip.
And thank you so much for all that are here for tuning into the Talent Sherpa podcast. This is where senior leaders come to rethink how human capital really works. And a quick shout out to one of our favorite listeners. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for being a part of the Talent Sherpa community.
Look, everybody, if you enjoyed today's episode, if you like the conversations that Jackson and I have, please hit the like button. That's how the algorithm works for us. Maybe even subscribe. Leave us a review on your favorite platform. We're on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and YouTube as well.
Look, as we talked about earlier today, you got to start with the outcome. So if you are a CHRO wondering where to start the journey because your CEO is asking you to do AI, whatever the heck that means, here's where you can start. Check out Propulsion AI at www.getpropulsion.ai. They are transforming how smart companies turn HR insights into powerful outcomes.
And if you're an emerging or a brand new CHRO and you're looking to accelerate your impact, head on over to talentsherpa.substack.com or to the website at mytalentsherpa.com. We've got resources specifically designed to help you navigate, elevate, and deliver results from day one. And I know, Jackson, how proud we are of this, the Substack just got named a bestseller. So great content being consumed a lot. Head on over, talentsherpa.substack.com.
Appreciate that, Scott. And thank you, everyone who reads and subscribes. And until next time, keep raising the bar, keep focusing on outcomes, and keep on climbing.